now some news from the world over. House Republicans are once again looking to forge a consensus on an immigration deal. But after a closed-door meeting on Thursday, U.S. immigration reform appears to be going nowhere fast. Speaker Paul Ryan emerged from the meeting without any agreement, saying only that the conversation will continue within the caucus. Ryan said that the discharge petition, as it is called, is pointless since none of the bills being proposed could be passed. We'll get into what that means in a moment. The stalemate comes as Homeland Security announced that more than 50,000 border arrests were made in May for a third month in a row. The number is about triple compared to when President Trump first took office. Joining me now with an update on the GOP immigration debate and more is Executive Director of the Center for Immigration Studies, Mark Krikorian. Mark, thanks for being here.
Sure, happy.
So tell me, give our audience, without making their eyes glaze over, a discharge petition is something that 218 members can submit to the House, and it would allow a bouquet of bills to be considered, something called Queen of the Hill. Explain briefly what that means.
What the discharge petition means is that the 218 members can set the agenda for the House instead of the leadership, which is the way it usually works. So basically taking that control away. And the way they have it set up is that there would be 4 bills that would get voted on, and whichever one got the most votes.
Immigration bills.
Immigration bills, that's the whole point.
Right.
4 different ways of amnestying these DACA people and have other measures in it. Whichever one got the most votes, as long as it passed and got the most votes, would be the one that then is the one that's passed by the House.
So what happened is a group of moderate conservatives said, wait, we want to do something for these DACA kids now. The majority of the Republican caucus doesn't want to do anything because midterms are coming up.
Right.
So my question is, they're forcing the hand of the leadership. Paul Ryan met with his caucus. It looks like they're giving themselves a June 12th deadline to come up with some compromise. What might that look like?
Probably it would follow the outline of what the White House had tried to do several months ago. They called it 4 pillars. So the first thing is it would have some kind of legitimate amnesty for these so-called DACA people, and probably many more. We don't know how many this would be, how many would get amnestied. Second thing is that it would supposedly deal with some of the chain migration categories. Those are the ones where one immigrant comes in, gets citizenship, he gets to sponsor his relatives, and they sponsor their relatives, and it goes on and on forever. Third thing is the wall. The president insists on that, and if this is going to be a Republican bill, it's going to have an actual wall, not just fencing. And then the third thing is there's a bunch of loopholes and stuff in the law that are driving much of what we're seeing on the border now with these families coming over, because the rules, the way they are now, if you have a kid with you, we basically have to let you go into the United States with a piece of paper saying, please show up, 2 years from now for court. So that's driving a lot of this. So the real question, though, is going to be, what are the details of those 4 elements?
Yeah. Well, you heard the report a moment ago. Nearly 52,000 migrants arrested at the border and in custody. This is a 3-fold increase from a year ago. What's happening? One thought that Trump's tough talk and the closing of loopholes and the tough arrests would deter people from coming. That doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, because some of that hasn't even happened. Congress has to do it. Some of it is relatively new. See, part of the reason the increase is so huge, because what we're really back to Obama-era levels of illegal immigration. It's just that last year, the levels collapsed because the president had just been inaugurated. A lot of people were like, well, let's wait and see. Smugglers said, let's hold off and see what's going on. Now they find out the president doesn't really have the power to stop them without congressional changes. And so it's going right back up. And most of these people are from Central America now, not Mexico anymore. Still a lot of Mexicans, but most are Central American. And a lot of them are people, either families with kids or so-called unaccompanied minors who aren't unaccompanied. Their smugglers bring them. And the rules as they are now means we can't hold any of those young people more than like a couple of weeks. If families bring them with them, we end up, under Obama, they would just let the adults go too, because the kids had to be let go.
Wow. Now, there's a lot of controversy about the separation of families. We keep hearing about that the president has a policy of separating families at the border as a means of deterrence. I want to play you this. This is Attorney General Jeff Sessions talking about it. Watch.
If people don't want to be separated from their children, they should not bring them with them. We've got to get this message out. You're not given immunity. You will be prosecuted if you come illegally, and if you bring children, you'll still be prosecuted.
And see, that's the key thing. The policy is not, oh, let's separate kids and that'll scare people away from doing it. The policy is you don't get a get-out-of-jail-free card just because you bring your kid with you. Under Obama, that was the case. People got the message, and they said, this is great. We're going to use our children as human shields against immigration enforcement. And what the Attorney General is saying is, not anymore. You're crossing the border illegally. That's a federal crime. We're going to prosecute you, and your kid doesn't go to jail. You're the one who goes to jail, so your kid is going to end up either in foster care, or if there are relatives to place him with, they do that. Yeah, that's why it's happening.
And that's the other part of this. These people are so urgently looking for a better way of life. Look, we've been to these countries. I've been to Central America, South America. Who wouldn't want to live in the United States, considering some of the very difficult circumstances these people live in, the poverty, the educational deficit? But they come and they're willing to risk the separation from their children for this way of life. And the United States essentially provides what, in the eyes of many, looks like foster care. They get education, they get sports training, they're either put with relatives or they're housed in facilities. Yep. In a moment, I'm going to get to Alex Azar, the HHS secretary, talking about this because HHS has custody of these kids. Is that, the bishops have often talked about the evils of separating families this way. Is there also an evil in a system that perpetuates people willingly separating themselves from families?
Sure. I mean, look, the parents bringing these kids with them, and sometimes they actually rent kids that even aren't their own to get the benefit from it. But let's assume it's parents bringing their own children. They're grown-ups. They know what they're doing. They're taking this risk because the risk paid off for years and years under Obama. We let everybody go. We still do this. I was just down in South Texas not that long ago. Yeah. Catch and release. Border Patrol literally takes them to the bus station and drops them off, and they hop on the bus to go to wherever their relatives are with the kids. So the problem here is that we have created an expectation that you can get away with it if you bring a kid with you. Changing that expectation is what we're trying to do. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to stick to it. You have to be consistent. It will work, but it's not going to happen in a week or 2 weeks.
I want to play this for you. And there's a lot of concern about this. This is Alex Azar being questioned about the separation of the family unit. Watch.
Individual children are separated from their parents only when those parents cross the border illegally and are arrested. We can't have children with parents who are in incarceration and so then they're given to me. If one presents at an actual border crossing and presents a case to come into this country, one is not arrested and one's children are not separated from them.
That's for people who are applying for asylum. This is the way. This is another, frankly, loophole. If you come to a regular crossing point, a port of entry is what it's called. You wait in line, you go up to the inspector and you say, hi, I'd like to apply for asylum. We end up letting those people in.
Both the child and the
child
parent.
and the parents. And
let's face it, the word has gone out. Go seek asylum.
Years ago.
And they'll let you in.
That's what this this caravan, remember, from a few weeks ago.
Every year
that was about.
Caravan.
This was the biggest and sort of the most involved. And what we're doing is teeing up a situation that's just like what you saw in Germany a few years back. Remember where the prime minister there in Germany said, yeah, anybody who wants to come in, come in. They had 1 million people pour in all at once. These steps are designed to prevent that kind of out of control flow into the border. And one last point, Mexico is a signatory to the UN Convention on Refugees. These people have an obligation to apply in the first country that they get to where they're not being persecuted. Every one of these people has gone 1,000 miles through Mexico, hasn't applied for asylum there. I don't think they should even be permitted to apply for asylum in the United States.
So what's the answer legislatively? Where are we now? And what, if you were writing up the legislation, what would it look like to stop this and yet keep an open heart and an open arm toward those who truly are in need of asylum? And there are people in need of asylum. I'm just not sure it's all the people we're seeing at the borders.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, if I were writing the bill, given the framework that sort of already exists, I would, in fact, I would be happy to give green cards to the people who had the DACA amnesty from Obama. It's about 700,000 people. I don't like it. It's distasteful.
Yeah,
it's a
even
mess.
though the courts have said that was an illegal act by the
There's no
president,
question. But it's been, what is it now? 6
6
years,
years.
something like that.
Yeah.
And at some point, I mean, Obama left the steaming mess for the Trump administration to clean up. So you got to do that, in my opinion. Clean that up. But every amnesty incentivizes new illegal immigration. So you need to plug these loopholes that are driving much of this so-called asylum flow. You need to get border enforcement up. Some places that's going to be a wall. Other places it'll be different things. I think, and this is something that they've pretty much ruled out, they're not even talking about it, E-Verify needs to be mandated. That's an online system. So when you hire somebody, you take their Social Security information anyway. You just check online and make sure they're telling you the truth. It exists now, but it's voluntary. So then the last thing I think is essential is an offset for the amnesty in cutting legal immigration. In other words, sort of pay as you go, if you will. And so we need reductions in legal immigration, especially the chain migration, which leads to sort of people sponsoring their relatives.
And we let in, what, 1 million people a year?
1 million people
and
a year
that's
now.
legal. That's legal.
Just legal
so
immigration.
what you're asking for is if you're going to grant amnesty to 800,000 people, you deduct that from the legal rolls.
Right. And going forward, legal immigration needs to be pared back anyway. There's really no reason we should be taking 1 million people.
Well,
a
you
year.
would have, but now to counter the argument, you would have people, and I hear them, from business to agriculture saying, we need these workers, Mark Krikorian, and Americans are not willing to do some of these jobs, so we need it. Immigrant flow is a good, healthy thing for a republic. You would say what?
Oldest cliche you hear in this business is jobs Americans won't do.
Right.
Look,
and our economy's booming, and there are more jobs, and we can't hire Americans. 50-year low in layoffs, Mark.
But what they don't tell you is that the unemployment rate only counts people who are actively looking for jobs. What they don't tell you is there are 50 million working-age Americans who aren't even looking for work. Now, some of those people don't want a job. They may be a mom at home taking care of their kids, what have you. But millions of those people could be drawn in because a tight labor market, in other words, where employers have trouble finding people, is the best social policy. Because because employers then say, okay, where am I going to get my workers? Let me go to the work release program at the jail, see if they're any good. Let me go to the high school. Let me go to a program for recovering addicts and see if I can help these guys get their lives together. Let me look at a program for developmentally disabled people, see if they maybe would be able to fill a slot. If you don't have to do that as an employer, why would you bother if you've got Hondurans lined up to give jobs to? But if you don't have that, then you have to start getting imaginative, and that is good for American workers.
Mark Krikorian, thank you for being here. You can follow Mark's work at the Center for Immigration Studies at CIS.org.